Every empire believes it can defy gravity, that its armies, its wealth, its prestige will keep it from the fate that swallowed every civilization before it. But history has only one law: what is borrowed must one day be repaid. Rome, Spain, Britain, and now the United States, four empires that rose on credit of gold, of faith, of reputation, and fell the same way in silence under the weight of their own promises. Not by war, not by rebellion, but by a quiet contagion, the loss of trust in the money they created. It never begins with fire. It begins with numbers, with deficits called temporary, with spending called necessary, with debt called sustainable. And then the pattern repeats: military overreach, unsustainable spending, currency debasement, inflation, loss of confidence, collapse, always in that order, always disguised as progress. The Romans diluted silver to fund their legions. The Spaniards drowned in the very silver that made them rich. The British printed to pay for war. And the Americans, they digitized debt and called it innovation. Empires don't die when enemies invade. They die when their money does. When citizens stop believing the symbol still holds value. Because money is never just metal or paper, it's trust. And trust, once broken, cannot be inflated back. Every empire keeps a balance sheet. Victories on one side, debts on the other. And history is the auditor that never forgets. 4 empires, 4 currencies, 4 collapses, the same sequence: dominance, overreach, inflation, denial, and ruin. And in every age, the leaders said the same words. This time it's different. But history doesn't repeat, it settles its debts. Rome ruled the known world for 5 centuries, a civilization built on law, discipline, and faith in its own endurance. Its roads stretched 10,000 miles. Its legions enforced order from the deserts of Egypt to the forests of Gaul. But beneath all that power, its heartbeat was silver, the denarius. Introduced in 211 BC, the denarius was 4.5 grams of pure silver, small, uniform, incorruptible. Merchants trusted it, soldiers fought for it. It was the empire's promise stamped into metal, value backed by virtue. That coin financed a miracle. Roads, aqueducts, and cities, all built on trust that 1 silver piece would always be worth 1 silver piece. For generations, that belief held. But power always hungers for more than discipline can supply. As Rome's borders expanded, its expenses multiplied. More legions to pay, more walls to build, more grain to ship. The treasury strained, and when the accounts no longer balanced, emperors discovered an ancient temptation: cheat the coin, and the people will never notice. Emperor Nero was the first to act. He reduced the silver content of the denarius from 100% to 90%. Just a sliver of deception, enough to mint 11 coins where 10 once stood. A small lie that worked too well. Future rulers copied the trick. Caracalla dropped purity to 50%. Gallienus to barely 5%. The denarius, once a bright silver promise, had become a dull copper shell. The face of the emperor still gleamed, but the value beneath had vanished. To the Roman people, nothing seemed broken at first. The coin still shined, the mint still worked. But bread cost more each week. Farmers stopped selling wheat for coins. Soldiers demanded gold or refused to fight. The system that bound Rome together, trade, taxes, trust, began to split apart. By the 3rd century, prices had risen 50-fold. A loaf of bread that once cost 1 denarius now cost 50. Markets emptied, cities shrank, bureaucrats were paid in food. The world's most advanced economy was reduced to barter. Yet Rome's borders still stood. Its generals still marched. But an empire can look alive long after its heart has stopped beating. The money had died, and the empire simply hadn't realized it yet. The fall of Rome wasn't an event, it was an equation. A slow subtraction of trust until nothing was left to subtract. The denarius didn't collapse overnight. It eroded coin by coin, lie by lie, until value itself became memory. When historians look back, they see the same lesson written in silver dust. You cannot debase a currency without debasing a civilization. And when money loses meaning, so does law, loyalty, and power itself. Rome proved the first law of empire: wealth built on illusion always ends in repentance. 1,000 years after Rome fell, a new empire rose from the ashes of Europe, Spain, the first global superpower. Its galleons ruled the oceans, its flag flew across 4 continents, and at its center was something Rome had never dreamed of, an endless river of silver. In 1545, Spanish explorers discovered the Cerro Rico mountain in Potosi, in what is now Bolivia. Inside that mountain lay more silver than the world had ever seen. They called it the Rich Hill. For 2 centuries, it became the beating heart of global wealth. Every year, fleets carried tons of bullion across the Atlantic. The Spanish dollar, pure, gleaming, and plentiful, became the first truly global currency. From Asia to Europe, it was trusted, traded, and worshipped. Spain believed it had found the secret to eternal prosperity. But abundance is its own illusion. Wealth without production breeds decay. The empire that once mined silver stopped making anything else. Instead of building industries, Spain bought them from England, France, and the Netherlands. Money flowed in from the colonies and out to its rivals. Between 1500 and 1600, prices across Europe rose tenfold. The coins had not changed. The silver had simply multiplied. The more Spain minted, the less each coin was worth. The empire was rich in metal and poor in mathematics. And with easy wealth came easy debt. Spanish kings borrowed to fund wars, palaces, and crusades against the Ottomans, against Protestants, against time itself. When the bills came due, the treasury was empty. The mines still glittered, but the trust was gone. In 1557, King Philip II declared bankruptcy. Then again in 1560, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 defaults in 40 years, while controlling half of the world's silver supply. The richest empire in history could not pay its bills. Each default tore another thread of confidence. Lenders fled. Interest rates soared. And like Rome before it, Spain turned to debasement, minting copper coins and calling them silver. But the markets weren't fooled. The currency lost credibility. The empire lost time. By the 1600s, Spain's armies were shrinking. Its trade routes were bleeding. Its colonies slipped away. The empire that owned the world's treasure could no longer afford to keep it. The pattern was the same: unsustainable spending, currency inflation, default, decline. The silver that once made Spain powerful had quietly poisoned its foundations. Spain proved a darker truth: even infinite wealth cannot save an empire from itself. Because when money grows faster than discipline, collapse is no longer an accident, it's destiny. By the 19th century, the British Empire spanned the globe. A quarter of humanity lived under its flag. Its navy ruled the seas, its merchants ruled the markets, and its money, the pound sterling, ruled the world. For 2 centuries, the pound was backed by gold, one of the strongest currencies in history. Trust in that small silver and gold promise built railroads, colonies, and commerce from Africa to India. The world's wealth flowed through London's banks. But empires don't collapse from weakness. They collapse from exhaustion. Britain's dominance demanded constant borrowing, for wars, for colonies, for control. Its credit became its crown jewel and its curse. In 1914, Britain entered the First World War with national debt near £600 million. By the war's end, it was $7 billion, more than 10 times higher. To pay for victory, the empire mortgaged its future. To finance the war, Britain suspended the gold standard, the very anchor that gave its currency strength. It printed money instead, confident it could restore order afterward. But paper promises are easy to make and hard to undo. In 1925, Winston Churchill, then Chancellor of the Exchequer, restored the gold standard at its pre-war rate. It was a fatal mistake. The pound was overvalued, exports collapsed, unemployment soared. The empire could no longer afford its own illusion. By 1931, the pound left gold forever. The illusion of permanence was gone. The currency devalued. Savings evaporated. Confidence, the foundation of empire, cracked like glass. The Second World War finished what the First had begun. By 1945, Britain's national debt reached 270% of GDP. The empire had won the war, but lost the century. The cost of victory was insolvency. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, the world crowned a new financial king, the US dollar. The pound, once the global reserve, became a relic of a vanished order. Britain's creditors became its masters. Post-war governments tried to restore the illusion through austerity, loans, and hope. But the math never changed. In 1949, the pound was devalued by 30%. In 1967, again. Each fall erased savings and pride alike. By the 1970s, inflation hit 25%. Britain, the empire that once financed the world, went to the IMF for a bailout. The sun that had never set on the British Empire finally did, not in battle, but in balance sheets. Britain proved the third rule of empire. No nation can borrow its way to eternity. When the debt becomes the empire is already gone. In 1944, as Britain's empire dimmed, another light rose across the Atlantic. The United States, untouched by ruin, armed with factories and backed by gold, emerged as the lender, the builder, and the banker to the world. At Bretton Woods, 44 nations gathered to rebuild civilization. They agreed on one idea: the US dollar would anchor the world. $35 for 1 ounce of gold. America held 2/3 of the planet's reserves. It was trust made tangible. The post-war years became the American century. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe. The GI Bill rebuilt the middle class. The dollar became the passport of prosperity, traded, trusted, and worshipped like a modern denarius. But power breeds appetite. The Cold War demanded armies on every continent. The Vietnam War drained treasure and faith alike. Social programs expanded. Debt followed. America was still rich, but no longer disciplined. In 1971, Nixon made the fateful declaration: the dollar would no longer be backed by gold. The promise of metal was replaced by the promise of management. Money became an idea, and faith its only collateral. The world adapted. Oil was priced in dollars, trade settled in dollars. Nations hoarded dollars as the new gold. The petrodollar became the empire's invisible army, enforcing loyalty without invasion. For decades, it seemed flawless. America could print what others had to earn. Deficits became doctrine. Consumption replaced production. The empire exported paper and imported everything else. But debt compounds like history itself. In 1980, it was under $1 trillion. By 2000, $5 trillion. By 2020, $27 trillion. By 2025, $36 trillion and counting. Each number an echo of overconfidence. And beneath those numbers lies a moral inversion. Once, America's wealth created its money. Now, its money creates the illusion of wealth. The empire that defined value has begun to lose its sense of it. The Federal Reserve prints to prevent collapse. Congress spends to prevent unrest. Markets rally not on earnings, but on expectation. It's not capitalism anymore. It's maintenance. The empire doesn't grow, it floats. Like Rome shaving silver, or Spain flooding markets with bullion, or Britain borrowing against tomorrow, America's brilliance has become its burden. It believes the pattern cannot touch it. It already has. Because in the end, empires don't fall when enemies invade. They fall when faith matures, and the world decides the promise is no longer enough. The question isn't whether the dollar will fall. It's whether the world will remember that every currency of empire, like every empire itself, expires on schedule. History doesn't repeat. It rhymes in the language of numbers. Every empire, every century, every continent has heard the same rhythm before collapse. And today that rhythm plays again, louder than ever. Stage 1, dominance. The United States commands the oceans, the air, and the internet itself. Its dollar powers global trade. Its debt backs the world's pensions. Like Rome in its prime, its reach feels eternal. Stage 2, overextension. 800 military bases, 70 countries, 24-hour wars that never end. Each financed not by gold or production, but by promises. Rome called it tribute. We call it foreign aid. Stage 3, deficit addiction. Every empire learns to live beyond its means. In Washington, deficits are no longer warnings. They are campaign slogans. Politicians promise everything: but the cost is invisible, paid in inflation and time. Stage 4. Debasement. Between 2008 and 2025, the U.S. printed more money than in its previous 200 years combined. Each new crisis demanded another trillion. Each trillion bought another year of denial. Rome shaved silver from its coins. Spain flooded the world with silver from the New World. Britain broke from gold. America digitized its wealth. Different tools, same outcome. Money loses meaning when it no longer costs effort. Stage 5. Inflation. The silent tax that punishes patience. Official numbers say manageable. Reality says unlivable. Food, rent, healthcare, all recalibrated upward, while wages stagnate beneath history's weight. Stage 6. Loss of trust. BRICS. Nations build their own systems. Central banks buy gold faster than at any point in 50 years. Even America's allies diversify, whispering the truth quietly. The empire's money no longer feels immortal. Confidence, once America's greatest export, is being repatriated in silence. Each auction tests faith. Each downgrade erodes prestige. Each policy delay becomes prophecy. Stage 7. Reckoning. Every empire reaches the moment when debt service exceeds defense and interest outweighs innovation. America crossed that line already. The math confirms what optimism denies. The cost of interest now surpasses $1.2 trillion a year, more than the Pentagon, more than Medicare, more than the hope of repayment itself. The empire works hardest not for its people but for its creditors. Rome fell when its soldiers stopped trusting their pay. Spain fell when its lenders stopped rolling its debt. Britain fell when its allies stopped defending its currency. The pattern doesn't need enemies. It needs only time. Because no empire collapses in a day. It happens in interest payments, in inflation reports, in the quiet realization that the promise is gone, that the numbers don't add up, that belief itself has defaulted. The pattern isn't coming, it's here, and this time it's global. Every empire believes it can outthink decline, that it can manage collapse like a business plan, balance it with reforms, and survive history through strategy. But history doesn't negotiate, it collects. When collapse begins, it doesn't look like chaos. It looks like optimism. The markets bounce, politicians smile, commentators speak of stabilization. But what returns isn't confidence, it's habit. The empire is not recovering, it's rehearsing denial. Rome called it reorganization. Spain called it divine correction. Britain called it austerity. We call it monetary policy. The vocabulary changes. The delusion doesn't. Governments hold inquiries. Economists write reports. Central banks promise soft landings. But no empire has ever landed softly, not when it's falling under its own weight. The survivors will adapt. The rich will buy what the desperate must sell. The poor will learn to survive on less. And the middle class, the engine of every civilization, will quietly disappear between them. Still, something always changes after the reckoning. Every collapse kills a different kind of faith. In 1933, trust in banks died. In 1971, faith in gold died. In 2008, faith in the system died. And in 2026, it may be faith in the future that dies, the quiet belief that tomorrow will always be better than today. But history isn't only about endings. Decline is a diagnosis, not a death sentence. Every generation is given a chance to learn, to correct, to build something wiser from what was lost. Rome fell, but its laws survived. Spain collapsed, but its language spread across continents. Britain lost its empire, but its institutions outlived it. What remains after collapse is what mattered all along, the ideas worth keeping. The question is not whether America will fall, it's what part of it will deserve to survive. The greed or the grit, the arrogance or the innovation, the empire or the idea. When historians look back, they won't just see a crash. They'll see a civilization learning the hardest truth of all, that you cannot spend more than you earn, print more than you produce, or promise more than you can keep. Not forever. If 1929 was the crash of valuation and 2008 was the crash of debt, then 2026 will be the crash of illusion, the end of believing that prosperity can be printed. Empires don't fall in a day. They fall in interest payments, in broken promises, in quiet withdrawals of trust. And when the ledger finally closes, history will write its final line. We were warned. We didn't listen, and we paid in time what we refused to pay in discipline. History doesn't repeat, it settles its debts.